everybody. It's a little bit early, but that shouldn't stop you from having coffee with Scott Adams. That's me. So grab your cup. Do. Yeah, I forgot my theme song. Bum. Da. It's a little bit different every time. Everybody, get your coffee. It's very early here in Hawaii. Sorry, I didn't give you any warning, but that was a simultaneous sip. If you have your coffee, here it comes. Simultaneous sip. Oh, God. So today we're going to be talking about the president's latest tweet, a real gem of persuasion. Some of his best work. I'm using my phone as my spotlight here today. Yeah. So if you haven't seen the latest tweet from the president, it's a fresh one, and let me read it to you. Okay? Sorry about my lighting today. So the latest tweet from the president is he says, "This is the 1-year anniversary of my presidency, and the Democrats wanted to give me a nice president. Hashtag Democrat shutdown." I'll read it again. This is from President Trump this morning. "This is the 1-year anniversary of my presidency, and the Democrats wanted to give me a nice president. Hashtag Democrat shutdown." All right, now let me unpack that. There's a whole lot going on in there. The first thing is that he's calling it a Democrat shutdown instead of a Schumer shutdown. Now, that's probably a decision based on the fact that even the New York Times has reported it in a headline as a Democrat shutdown. So he's going with what people are already saying, so that he's agreeing with the headlines. Had the headline said a Schumer shutdown, I'm sure he would have gone with that. So it's hashtag Democrat shutdown now. And yeah, the New York Times and the AP both said that. And he's got this brief. So here's all the technique he's got going on persuasion-wise. His tweet is brief, it's short, that's always good. But he's making you think past the sale in his usual way. So by calling it a nice president from the Democrats, he's not only is he calling out that it's his anniversary and that he's had a good first year, at least by Republican standards, and he's blaming it, and he's blaming the Democrat shutdown on the Democrats. Of course, you'd expect that. But by calling it a nice present, it makes you think about whether it's a nice present. So if you're thinking about whether it's a nice present, you've already accepted uncritically that the Democrats shut it down. You're also accepting that they're stupid because they're giving him a present. Now, from a negotiating position, a strong thing to do is to say, yeah, well, whatever you're threatening to do to me, I don't even care. Bring it on. You want to punch me? I like being punched. You want to throw me in the briar patch? I like being thrown in that briar patch. You want to insult me? I like being insulted. You know, so he's taking a brilliant and funny position that it's not just bad negotiating and bad strategy on the part of the Democrats, but it's so bad it's actually a present. That they're actually giving him a present. Now, the way he's phrased it as a nice present, you can't ignore that. So again, he's got that a little bit wrongness that he builds into everything he does. And it's the little bit of wrongness, the part that seems just a little bit unpresidential, just a little bit funnier or more flip than you should be in the job, It's that little bit of wrongness that binds it to your memory and makes it unforgettable. So he's also front-running the news today. So by getting up early and hitting it this way, he guarantees everybody has to talk about his quote. They'll be laughing about it, and it perfectly frames him as being in the catbird seat, not catbird, the catbird seat, meaning that he's time is on his side, and it's just going to look worse and worse for the Democrats. So persuasion-wise, if you're just forget about the politics, if you just look at the technique involved in the president's tweet, it's really good. I'm going to try to fix my light a little bit here. All right. Yeah, and he also says, "I like the heat," which is also a good strategy. Bring it on! I like the heat. Now, the other part of my Periscope today is I want to talk about predictions for 2018. Now, it's really too early to make a real prediction about 2018. So anything I say now, call it provisional, subject to change. Because in Trump years, between now and November, it's like 1,000 years. There's just so much that could change between now and then. But if you were to just straight line it, a straight line prediction, meaning that all you're doing is saying that if things go the way they're going now, where do we end up? And I'm telling you, if things go the way they're going now, it's starting to look like a slaughter in 2018, meaning that the GOP will just romp. And here are the factors that are coming together. You're seeing that, and I don't know if it's a coincidence or it's because of the fake news awards or what, but you're seeing articles now, opinion pieces, that are running in the anti-Trump media that are just entirely positive to the president, that he's actually done a good job in his first year. Now, maybe those minority opinions were there, but I didn't see them as much. So it seems like the opposition just to remain legitimate if they can, because they're trying to retain legitimacy in the context of a president having a fake news award and naming them by name, right? When that happens, you got to try a little harder to remain objective looking, at least to your audience. And so it seems to me that he's influenced the enemy press, the enemies to him, into running at least some opinion polls in their publications that say he's doing stuff right. So that part's good. Now imagine if you're running against Republicans, right? Now the bad analysis here, the analysis that I think is bad to the point of being dumb, is that the president's approval rating is low. But I think everybody understands at this point that when people say, "Do you approve of the president?" they're really thinking about his personality and his approach, the offensive things he said, the people he's offended. They're not really talking about the outcomes anymore, because the outcomes are looking pretty good. He's got good economy, he's got good jobs, ISIS defeated, courts, blah, 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 blah. I could go through the long list, but his accomplishments are really going to be hard to fight against. So if you think that a GOP candidate whose name is not Donald Trump, but is running on the record that the Republicans in charge have for them, they're going to have all the good without the bad. Because the bad is almost entirely President Trump's personal approach. But if you're another Republican candidate, you're just not Donald Trump. But you are associated with good economy, good jobs, fighting ISIS. So you're associated with all this stuff. In the meantime, because the Democrats are not in power, they either have to say that all of those things are bad, which is just ridiculous. You can't argue against the economy or fighting ISIS. Yet there's just not much material there to work at. the best thing they have going for them is that there might be something bad in the future, or there might be trouble with the deficit. But if you're a Democrat arguing against deficit spending, it's not your most comfortable approach, right? Because Democrats are more associated with deficits, whether fair or not, they're more associated with it. So it's starting to look like the GOP is going to be going into the 2018 midterms with a fairly substantial body of accomplishment, from tax reductions to the economy to jobs to ISIS, all the usual stuff. And what the Democrats will be most known for in all of 2018 is shutting down the government, because they wouldn't approve another continuing resolution. Now, I don't know if President Trump created this situation intentionally, because when he talks about it being a gift for his first anniversary in office, he's not far off, because this is certainly working in his favor, and he certainly did cause it to happen by negotiating hard. And here's the funny part. If you're looking at the incompetence of Democratic leadership, now not talking about policies, just the quality of the leadership itself, here's the setup. The Democrats believe, both the politicians and the public, they believe that the GOP are less caring about hurting other people. They believe they're less caring. So the Democrats' strategy is to see who cares the most about hurting innocent people with this government shutdown. Because the people being hurt are not the politicians, except for perhaps the Democrats at this point. The people being hurt are just innocent people in a number of different ways. So if you're playing a game of chicken with a monster, that's what they think of President Trump. If you're playing a game of chicken with a monster as to who is willing to hurt strangers the most to get a good outcome, I don't know if you want to pick this fight. It feels like the worst strategy I've ever seen. And so I also thought it was funny that the Democrats are saying, why can't you take yes for an answer, President Trump? We even offered you money for the wall, not enough apparently. We thought we gave you everything you want, and you still said no. Well, he's saying no because he can just keep pushing. President Trump was not elected to roll over in negotiations. He was elected to be exactly what we're seeing, right? So what you're seeing is as close to exactly what people asked for as anything could be. He's a hard-nosed, tough negotiator. He said no, 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 and he's holding their feet to the fire while he tweets, "Thank you for the gift," which they did give him, it looks like. So can anybody even give me a suggestion of what a Democrat running in 2018 would even say to make their case? What do they have that they can say? Now, well, I'm pretty sure everybody's kids are going to get their health insurance. I don't think there's much chance that that's not going to happen. Right. So if the Democrats go with the racism card, they're really talking about the president who, guess what, isn't running for election. He's not on the ballot. So their strongest attack doesn't apply to other Republicans who have also somewhat consistently criticized their own president for going over the line and being offensive. So the Republicans can just go out there and say, yeah, all that stuff bothers me too. Now let me ask you this question. we like to think, you like to think that there's, you've got your President Trump wanting to do one set of things, and you've got your Democrats who are trying to, rein him in and to get him to be either more moderate or more something. They're trying to control him with whatever power they have. But realistically, who has more power over the president in terms of actually making policy? Is it Republicans or Democrats? Because it seems to me, all things considered, that Lindsey Graham has far more persuasive influence over President Trump than, for example, Chuck Schumer. So if you think the president needs to be, let's say, controlled, who's going to do it? Democrats? Not a chance. Republicans? Absolutely. Of course. It's the people close to him who are going to be a moderating influence, and you've seen this already. You've seen the Republicans on a number of occasions break ranks with the president. So if you need some resistance that works, Republicans offer that. Resistance being too strong a word. They are a moderating influence on the president. Democrats would like to be a moderating influence, but they're just not very good at it, and they're so far on the other side that their kind of moderation may have less effect. So almost everything that you can think of is starting to trend in a Republican direction, because we're entering the golden age where it seems like just about everything is working. Yeah, and if you look at the Me Too phenomenon, I guess, so many of the people accused of that are Hollywood types and whatnot, that you're starting to associate let's say, sex offenders with Democrats, unfairly, but you're starting, our minds are starting to conflate them because there are so many stories about people in entertainment, and you assume they're all liberals. So now there's always a problem with somebody like me, deeply uninformed about the inner workings of politics. So let me acknowledge that as clearly as I can. There are a lot of variables in a midterm election. It has to do with who's retiring, which places went to Trump, but still have a Democrat running for the office. So you have lots of variables. But it seems to me that all the macro variables, which is how have things been going in the world for the past year or two, are going to look really, really good for Republicans. And here's the other thing that's a big deal. In a normal election where you've got a Republican against a Democrat, the Democrats can own the social issues, because the country's a little more liberal, progressive than Republicans in general. But what happens when you get to a place where all the big social issues have largely been solved, right? You've got your gay marriage, you've got weed legal in the states that want it to be legal. So far the government is hands off, even though they're talking about not being hands off. I don't see that changing. So you've got a situation in which the Republicans are really not in a position to change much of anything. I don't see. I can't imagine, for example, I don't know. Let's say abortion becoming illegal, because the minute the federal government got into that business, the states would just say, we have to make it legal, because otherwise all our businesses will leave the state. All right. Sorry I surprised you with that sip. Simultaneous sip? Here we go. So I posted a blog post moments ago before I got on here about the FISA situation. And I was comparing it to the Russia collusion story. Now, they both have something in common that's kind of interesting. In both cases, in order for the accused to clear themselves, they would have to effectively prove a negative. In other words, prove that something did not happen. Now, in our world, you can prove something did happen if you have the right evidence. You might have a video, you might have DNA, you might have eyewitness accounts. So you can prove something did happen sometimes. But it's really hard to prove something didn't happen. So President Trump just has to sort of wait for this Russia collusion thing, because he can't prove he didn't do something. He just sort of has to wait for them to not prove he did, which is awkward and bad for him, because the longer it goes on, the longer people say, well, with all this smoke, there must be fire there. And even though the smoke is sort of tangential smoke, it's like a minor player over here lied to investigators. There's Manafort who did something before he was on the campaign. There were some condos purchased by some Russians. There was a meeting that happened one time with a Russian in it. And all of these are not crimes or really even evidence of crimes, but they feel like it, right? It's all this where there's smoke, there must be fire situation. So if you're President Trump, you're Republicans, what do you do in a situation where you can't prove something didn't happen? It just can't be done. Well, one way you do it is you counterattack using exactly the same strategy. And you see the Devin Nunes secret memo has the same quality to it, which is the public hasn't seen it, and the politicians who have seen it can't really talk about it in the detail that they would need to talk about it to really help us understand. So the longer that doesn't get released, the longer we're saying, well, there must be a reason it's not being released. It must be because Democrats know they're guilty, or it must be terrible, or we're going to feel that the longer it goes, the more true it must be, even though we don't know what's in it. So we have this weird situation where the public feels there's some accusation about FISA warrant misuse by the same people who were part of the investigation on Russian collusion. So did those people do something bad? I don't know. I haven't seen the memo. But can the people who were sort of indirectly accused of these bad events prove they didn't do something? Nope. They can't prove it didn't happen, right? Partly in this case because there's an ongoing investigation. There's all kinds of things they can't say in public about sources and methods. They can't really try their case in public. They need to keep what they know, close to them in case they have to do a real legal trial. So it puts the DOJ and the FBI in the same position that they've put the president in, which is they can't prove something didn't happen. There's just that allegation out there that's floating around. Now, I've predicted that if we ever do see the Nunes memo, that it will be underwhelming, or at least it will be ambiguous, because Democrats will claim, and probably with some credibility, this stuff was left out. Maybe there's an error here that doesn't seem too important, but if you see any error, you say to yourself, well, if there's an error, maybe there are other errors. So you could expect that whatever comes of that, the Democrats will do a good job of discrediting it and making it look like it's an attack on the good people in the FBI or whatever. Why is Trump silent on the Nunes memo? Well, we can't know what's in his mind. I always try to caution. But I will point out that, as I just did, that the longer it goes, the better it is for the president. So the longer we don't know what's in it, but we're also talking about it, the better it is. Because our impressions of it will start to harden. In other words, we'll all tell ourselves a story that we like to hear. Like my story might be this or that happened. The story in your head might be, well, I don't know what happened, but I think this or that happened that's also bad. So we're all creating our own personal stories of bad things that happened, and those are sinking in and becoming part of our thoughts. If it turns out that 2 months from now that memo is released and it turns out it's no big deal, we still sort of have the same feeling as if it was, because we will have months of thinking it's true, and then some little news report that says, oh, it wasn't true after all, which we will just dismiss as trivial because there's not much to that story. The story that it might be true is gigantic. The story that, oh, it turns out there wasn't much to it, will be small. Now, you've seen the same effect other people have reported on this, where you see the press that's anti-Trump will write a story that says something like, President Trump killed 12 people and boarded them up in a wall in his building. And you'll think to yourself, that doesn't sound likely. But CNN will talk about it, MSNBC will talk about it, they'll speculate how he did it, what kind of tools he used, who was helping him. And before you know it, your mind will think this thing must be true. And then a month later, they'll say, oh, we found out there were no bodies in the wall. It was all wrong. But the correction doesn't have much impact on you because you lived with this truth for months. It might have had a visual with it, etc. And so that by the time it's debunked, it just doesn't have the same emotional impact as it did when you thought it was real. So you're going to see the same thing with Russia collusion, and you're going to see the same thing with the Nunes memo, that they both will do all of their damage without any regard to the actual facts of them. If there was nothing, the mainstream media would have already reported it. Not true. The allegation by Schiff, which I think he'll probably be able to back up, is that the memo is written in a biased Republican way that leaves out things or shades things or leads you to a conclusion maybe that the facts don't quite support. We don't know the details, but it does feel fair to say it will not be an unbiased, neutral memo because it's written by a politician. You know, there's no such thing as a politician who writes an unbiased memo. And if you ever see a politician write an unbiased memo, you should immediately stop voting for them because they have something wrong with them. You know, there's maybe a mental problem. Now, the biggest worry about the FISA stuff from the people who don't know what's in the memo, people like me, is that the dossier, which was paid for by the Clinton, at least partially paid for by the Clinton people, may have been part of the information used to get a warrant for wiretapping, if we call it wiretapping, surveillance, I guess. And I don't see the crime there. I don't even see the impropriety there. I hear what you're saying, like it doesn't sound good, but information is information. If the FBI had a reason to believe it was true or had a likely or was likely to be true, they also had a responsibility to follow up on it. They didn't really have a choice once they thought it came from a credible or semi-credible source. Kind of have to follow up on it. Lying to the FISA court is a no-no, but if the allegation is simply that they took the dossier in and said, hey, we got this dossier from, we got this information from a source that we've used before, and it worked before, That's not really lying. Accusing him of something they knew he didn't do. Well, that's going to be hard to prove. I suspect that in the end, the biggest, crimes, if you will, I'm using that word sort of in a literary sense, literary, not literal sense, but the biggest crimes might be that people had intentions in their heads. But that doesn't mean that the things they did as part of their job were necessarily the wrong things for someone in that job. Obama, see, notice the amount of speculation you're seeing about the memo as we're talking about it. We don't know what's in it, but we've all talked ourselves into some version of it. So, I believe there's someone who thinks there's something about Obama and Lynch in there. There's something about lying to get a FISA thing. There's probably some of you think there's some illegal unmasking, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? We don't know. So I didn't check the dates of the latest CNN poll that showed President Trump's approval had gone up. Now, not up a lot, up to 40%, and I don't know the last time it was at 40%. Has CNN ever had the president at 40%? Can somebody fact check me on that? So I'm not sure if it's the highest level he's been. It was December 22. What's that? That's not when they did the CNN poll of his approval, is it? Yeah, I wouldn't buy into the Rasmussen poll. That's, CNN. So CNN says that Rasmussen does not meet their standards for polling. I don't know what that means, but I think you should take that seriously. That's not the sort of thing they would lie about. So it overpolls Democrats. Yeah, I've said often that approval polls are not really meaningful with this particular president because he's so polarizing that people are just sort of saying, which party you're in. It's not really an approval poll. But if the direction changes, that does mean some people are coming over. So a directional change or a movement in one direction could tell you something. But the absolute number, that's not telling you as much as it might have been with a normal poll. Scott doesn't care about the Fourth Amendment. First of all, you can't read my mind to know what I care about. Second of all, I'm sure that's not true, whatever you're referring to. So some people saying the Rasmussen polls were the most accurate in the election. Well, here's the thing. If the Rasmussen poll said Trump was doing better than other polls, some poll was going to say that. There was going to be some poll that had the highest number. But that's different from saying their methodology is solid. And by the way, I don't know anything about Rasmussen's methodology. I just know that a major news organization says the methodology doesn't meet their requirements for one reason or another. 40% approval at the 1 year mark is historically low. Yeah, my point being before that the absolute amount, the 40%, tells you nothing. But what might tell you something is that if it's moving up or down, that could tell you something. But the absolute level doesn't tell you anything with this president, because people are sort of voting against his personality or his approach or his offensive things he said. So I have a suspicion that the number of shy Trump supporters went from enough to fool most of the pollsters to a much bigger number. Tell me if you agree with this speculation. My speculation is that however many shy Trump supporters there used to be, I'll bet there's more now. Because people don't hate a good economy, and they don't hate fighting ISIS. And the things that you could criticize him for, they do seem they're either imaginary or they're future, right? So even if you look at the latest disasters, the 3 hurricanes and the wildfires in California. So we've got 3 hurricanes and wildfires in California. Some experts are suggesting that those are because of climate change. But that really means those are Obama's hurricanes, because he had 8 years to fix this climate stuff. Not as if you could really do that. Whereas President Trump did what most people would say is a good job in emergency disaster. So President Trump cleaned up the hurricanes and the fire damage that the Obama administration created. Now, I'm not saying that completely seriously. I'm saying that if it's true that President Trump should be doing more on climate, and that if he did more it would make a difference, it should also be true that President Obama had 8 years, which is a long time, to do something with climate, and apparently did nothing, or at least did nothing that made a difference. Now, President Trump's approach, if I understand it, is that rather than reproducing what, let's say, a well-meaning Obama did, I'm sure he meant well I'm sure he meant to combat climate change, but everything he did amounted to kind of nothing, apparently, because the climate's still changing. So President Trump said, well, why don't I not waste all that money and resources to do another 8 years of nothing, when I could put those same resources into the economy? And then if we do have to do something, whether it's recover from a hurricane or relocate people or fortify a beach because the water's rising, you've got something like way more money to do whatever you need to do to fix it. Now, if you say that's not rational, I say it is rational. It could be right or it could be wrong, because there's a little bit of guesstimating what's going to happen and how much it's going to cost. But you got to say it's rational to build up your economy so that you are the strongest you could be to recover from whatever displacement there'll be from climate change. It's not crazy. A blue wave would kill the stock market. Maybe. I've got a feeling that any Democrat who used to hate President Trump and then looks at their 401k is just going to have some conflicting feelings. Somebody says Naval Ravikant did a Periscope. If you don't know Naval, Naval, Ravikant, Ravikant, I often refer to him as the smartest person I've ever met. And let me tell you, I've met a lot of smart people, but he might be the smartest person I've ever met. And so if Naval is doing Periscopes, you should make a point to check that out, because I'm not kidding you. Everything he says is smarter than everything everybody else says. So if you want to get smarter in a way that you can understand, because he's also very accessible, he's not going to complicate things. Type the name. Somebody type the name in the comments. Naval. So Naval Ravikant. Okay, check him out. He thought Nassim was the smartest. He's just smarter than I am. You know, there's a lot of space up there to be smarter than I am, but yeah, thank you, some of you, for putting his name in the comments. Yeah, and if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's @Naval. I think that's right. All right. Sam Harris thinks Nassim Taleb is an idiot. Well, I believe that they have the same opinion of each other. I've been following both of them, and I'm not going to give you an opinion there. Any news from Hawk Newsom? Well, I don't have news, but he just asked me to set up another call, so I'll get filled in pretty soon. I'll talk to him probably on Monday. I'm just looking at some of your comments here. That's why I'm being quiet for a moment. Does Trump still govern based on opinion? Well, I don't know exactly what you mean, governing based on opinion. He's a populist president, so that by its nature is supposed to be opinion. And so if he's doing a good job, he's leading based on popular opinion, yeah. Can you talk about how Fox News business model has changed in the last 2 years? Has it changed? I'm not aware that it has changed. Oh, so here's the dumbest thing that I hear as a criticism about President Trump, and one of the commenters said it. So I'm sorry, I'm going to call you dumb, or I'm going to have to call you dumb in public. There's no way around this. So the dumbest comment is that the president makes his decisions based on the last person he talks to. Now, here's something similar to that. Have you noticed that when you lose something, it's always in the last place you look? I'm just going to let that hang there for a minute. You know, the last person you talk to does not indicate that the other people were wrong. At some point, you're done talking to people, and you make a decision. Now, whoever thinks that President Trump makes his decision based on literally the last person he talks to, you're a fucking idiot. Nobody does that. And if they did do that, you would have no way of knowing it, because you don't know who the last person anybody talked to. How does anybody know the last person anybody talked to? Right? Do you think, I'll bet General Kelly doesn't know the last person that the president talked to. Nobody knows. He's got a phone, he's got people coming in and out, he's talking to people off duty, he's talking to people, when he's at the residence, he's talking to people in his helicopter, he's talking to people on the golf course. Who the hell knows who's the last person he talked to? It's really the dumbest thing. The similarly dumb thing is that people say that he acts impulsively. The suggestion is that the brain part of his body doesn't actually get involved in complicated governmental decisions. Now, what are the odds of that? Do you think there's any chance that his brain is not engaged in his decisions? That's not a thing. There are no people like that. Do you think he's like the one person who's been born without the ability to process his thoughts through his actual brain? It just goes, like in his eyes and then directly out of his arms and mouth. Like, is that how we think he's built? Like the inputs go in his ears and his nose and his eyes, and then without the brain being involved, it gets transmitted into speech. Now, I don't know how a mouth knows how to talk without the brain being involved. You would think that the act of talking would almost certainly engage your actual brain. But according to the critics of the president, who love their science, they're very pro-science, they believe that in this one case, there is incontrovertible evidence that he is the one person who can make language without the use of a brain. And that he makes his decisions based on the last person he talked to. Nobody does that. All right? Now, if you're saying the last person he talked to would have more influence than whoever talked to him before that, well, yes, of course. Do you know who else that would be true of? Every person on earth. Every person watching this will be more influenced by me right now than the last person I talked to. That's just how it works. The last person you talk to is more persuasive, right? You know who else is really persuasive? The first person you talk to. So the first person you talk to, sets a frame and primes you for all the information that will come after that. So the first person you talk to and the last person you talk to do have an oversized influence, right? But that has nothing to do with President Trump. That's everybody. We're all subject to exactly the same influence. So the people who say, well, he's got some brain problem, or I guess he's a narcissist, or whatever the hell they're saying, that somehow he doesn't engage his brain before he acts, and that he only cares about what the last person says. You are not part of the serious discussion, my friends. You are so anti-science that you shouldn't be talking in public. You should not be talking in public. All right, by popular command, popular request, shall we call it, we're going to go full goatee. And let me express the anti-Trump sentiment the way I see it expressed. He just makes a decision based on the last person he talks to. Also, he's just spontaneous. He doesn't think before he acts. He doesn't engage his brain. There's no thinking involved. I don't know how he became super successful across a variety of different fields, because he doesn't actually use a brain. He just believes whatever the last thing he heard. It's a lot of luck. I think it's just a lot of luck. Oh, also, some people are racist. All right. That was the Santa Ana Trail of Tents. I guess I don't know about that story. I am drinking Kona coffee. All right. We've still got 1.4 thousand live viewers. That's a lot. I think that's more to do with the time of day. And of all things, Sapiens is the best book in 10 years. Damn it. I have that book and I haven't read it yet. I was going to bring it with me, but I have the hardcover, and it's so heavy I didn't want to pack it. Now I have to read that damn book. I guess I'll have to download it on Kindle. All right, is there any other topics you'd like me to talk about? For those who came late, I'm predicting that unless something changes, and let's face it, between now and November 2018, a ton is going to change. So we don't know what direction it'll change. But the setup we have now is starting to look like a Republican slaughter. meaning that the Republicans will slaughter the Democrats. Because the Republicans are running on all kinds of success, and the Democrats will be running against President Trump's personality, which actually isn't in the conversation. So it's going to be a tough matchup for them. Did Christine and I have a hot, lovely relations on the beach? It's a public beach. We already talked about Jordan Peterson's interview. That was a different Periscope. Oh, prediction on how long the shutdown lasts. Well, I don't have a prediction that's better than the professionals. But generally, these are just a few days, probably a weekend situation. Oh yeah, let's talk about the Las Vegas shooter. I know some of you are tired of hearing me brag about my correct predictions, but bragging about the correct predictions is part of the process, right? You will have more interest in my future predictions if I tell you that the last ones came out well. So if you will bear with me, I would like to brag about my Las Vegas shooter prediction. If you remember when the Las Vegas shooter incident first happened, much of the world said, well, that's ISIS, ISIS, ISIS. And I said, absolutely not. My prediction is it is not ISIS. And then ISIS, I think ISIS claimed responsibility at one point, right? And I still said, no, it's not. That's not ISIS. Now, can you remember anybody else in public telling you it wasn't going to be ISIS? Now, of course, the more responsible press are not in the business of predicting. They're more in the news business. So they probably shouldn't be saying the things that I say. But I think I was the first. I called it and stuck with it, yeah, as somebody just said. Now, the other thing I said is that we would find that he was involved, the shooter, with some other crime. Now, I was speculating, it might be, gun running or drugs or something, but there was some other crime involved. And when his brother was outed as being a pedophile, or not a pedophile, but he had child porn on his computer, I speculated, and I think it was probably just on Periscope, that the shooter probably had some child porn too, and that there might be some digital trail from the brother who's already in trouble, and they can investigate all of his digital connections and history, and the brother. Because it seems to me they probably knew about each other. They might have shared a link, right, or a picture or something. So my guess is that the brother, who was already under investigation for child porn, made the brother who was the shooter think, okay, my time is up. I'm definitely going to get whacked for this. So I might as well go out big and show the world how evil I am and that I deserve to die. So the news this morning said there's no motive, that we don't know the motive. And I said from the beginning, anybody remember what I said his motive was fairly early on? Not the first day or so, but it took me a while to pull this together. I said that his motive was to show the world two things. He's evil, like really evil, and he deserved to die. And he showed us both of those things, that he's evil and he deserves to die. And then, of course, he did. Now, I don't think he needed more of a motive. I think that was all the motive he needed. CIA connections, yes or no? Absolutely no. Didn't bin Laden have child porn? I don't know if bin Laden had child porn, but it might have been a good psyops to say he did. So there's no way we would ever know for sure. How would you recommend Democrats use persuasion to come out ahead in 2018? it's hard if you're not the party in power. They've got a little bit they can work with on, he's gonna cut your social programs, and health care may not be worked out. But my guess is that between now and November, even the Republicans will have made some progress on health care. So they're going to take away that ammo before Election Day, I'm sure. Or they will lessen that ammo. They won't take it away. Yeah, so there's an article in Politico. Michael Cruz, I hope I'm saying the name right. He interviewed me about President Trump's use of visuals, and the article's not about me. I was just one of the people who got mentioned. And there were a number of other examples of the president using visuals well. This is a sort of story that you just didn't see before, because there wasn't anybody doing it this well. But remember, I told you that I think you can find the link in my Twitter feed. Remember, I told you that President Trump would change what we think about, the nature of reality, and you're starting to see that in a number of different ways now. Who is my favorite and least favorite interviewer? I'll give you a few favorites. Jesse Lee Peterson, just because there's just something magical about that guy's energy. Just being in the same room with him was great. Yeah, the Joe Rogan interview was great. Greg Gutfeld was not an interview per se. That was more of an appearance. Tucker's great. So here's the thing: a TV interview where you're remote. So if you're in one place and the interviewer's in another place, those can only be just so good, because you can't have chemistry in that situation. You're literally not even seeing each other. I think the interviewer can see me, but I can't see the interviewer. In those situations, there's no chemistry happening per se. The best they can do is give you a good question and let you talk. So I would say Tucker and Smirkanish are both great at what they do, but the medium they use of television doesn't allow chemistry. So, but they both did terrific jobs of letting me talk, so to speak. Dave Rubin, another great interviewer. So what the difference between a good interview and a great interview is how they make you feel. Right? Do you feel comfortable? Do you feel that you can give your real opinion? Do you feel that they're asking the right follow-up questions, so you don't feel like you've got to try too hard to get everything in? Do you feel like you have enough time? Do you feel unrushed? There's just a whole bunch of chemistry-related things in there. So Dave Rubin does his interviews in person, and so the chemistry can come into play, and I have good chemistry with Dave. He's a great guy. I enjoyed talking to him and hanging out with him a little bit there. So and Jesse Lee Peterson was in person as well, and you can really feel the charisma in those situations. Tucker interrupts when he doesn't like what you're saying or you're off topic. I don't believe he ever interrupted me. Are relations between North and South Korea truly improving? Yes, because talking is better than not talking. Rubin has the ability to make his guests look good and make their point. Yeah, and it's funny. The reason you call that out is because it's rare. I'll tell you one of the best interviews I ever had. It started to be the worst. It was Alex, somebody who was a DJ in San Francisco a long time ago. I came in for an interview when I was first doing Dilbert and had my first little Dilbert book out. And he didn't know who I was, why I was there. and he thought the book was about something else. So he starts the interview and realizes he doesn't know who I am, why I'm there, or why he should be interviewing me. And he turned that disaster into one of the best interviews I've ever had, just through talent. Will you allow that you were wrong about ISIS to exist for many years under siege? You mean in terms of the book about, I think you're talking about my religion war book, in which the caliphate grows and starts using drones to attack the mainland. Well, the only part that is wrong is the timing, because the drones are coming slightly. I mean, they started during ISIS's caliphate days, but it looks like the drone attacks will actually be more of a post-caliphate attack. So I'm going to say that's about as close as you can get without being exactly right. Does choice of clothing color impact viewers? Yes, it does. What Dilbert book should I get? Just get the most recent one. It'll seem most relevant. The most recent Dilbert book, that's the one that's just cartoons, is Dilbert Gets Reaccommodated. I'm one of your favorite politicians. Well, I'm not a politician, but thank you. Any plans for a new book? Not a specific plan, no. What should Republicans do about social media purging conservative users? Well, they should encourage conservative users not to cross the line. Obviously there are millions of conservatives saying conservative things all over social media. The ones getting banned are crossing a line, and I don't think the line is so gross that people can't avoid it if they want to. What about shadow banning? Well, the anecdotal evidence suggests it's happening, but that's all we have for now. Oh, somebody mentioned one of my pet peeves. You know when you use a credit card reader at the store and it says to insert your card, and then it says the phrase "do not remove card," but our brains see the keywords in sentences and we sort of don't see the "do not" part. And so if you're distracted, you look down and you quickly read something that says remove card and you remove it, even though if you had read it carefully, it would have said do not remove. Now, I've talked to cashiers and asked them, and they do say, oh yeah, that's a problem. They remove their card because they read do not remove card and see remove card. Yeah, so how should it be worded correctly? So keep card inserted. Exactly. So keep card inserted is unambiguous. Remove card is unambiguous. Do not remove card is just a mistake. You could ask anybody in the field of user interface design, they would all tell you the same thing. It's just a mistake, and it's a big one. If you look at all the time that is wasted by all the people who use those machines, and it consistently says that same wrong thing wherever you are, it's enormous. It's an enormous user interface problem, and it's the easiest one you could ever fix. So it looks like we've talked about everything we need to talk about. Thank you all for joining. And if you'd like one last sip, a toast. To the tears of our enemies, let us drink. All right. I'll